You're a little cranky this morning. I hope you're ready for all that. As if you're ready, I'm ready. Go. Let's get some questions. Yes, sir.
Under the current administration, board or elected president, how would you handle the national debt?
Well, I think there's three things you have to do to handle the national debt. And you're right. Barack Obama has more debt than any of his predecessors. $13 trillion in debt. So first, on the spending budget is spent on entitlements and debt service. 71 cents of every dollar. Everything else we do, national defense, education, health care, all the rest of that stuff, 29 cents. Entitlements and debt service, 71 cents of every dollar. So if you don't take on the entitlement thing, that national, the person in this race, the only one today, reform plan. I did it back in point plan that will save over $1 trillion scored by the Congressional Budget Office over the next years. And I thought it was very interesting. Debates ago, they asked Mark his entitlement reform plan. He gave a 90-second answer on tax reform. And then jumped in, and he gave a second critique of Mark. And then Marco Rubio got back in to defend his tax plan against Ted Cruz's attacks. And I finally jumped in and said, can I interrupt the United States Senate to actually answer the question that Maria Bartiromo asked on entitlement reform? The reason they can't answer you is because they don't have a plan. And you know why? Because they're scared of you. They're scared of you. They think if they actually tell you that we have to change entitlements, then you won't vote for them. I feel differently. I trust you. I'm not afraid of you. I trust you. I think you already know we got a big entitlement problem, and you already know we got to do something about it, or in 7 to 8 years, it's going to go insolvent. So here's what we need to do. Social Security, we got to raise the retirement age. And we got to raise it 2 years. I'd raise it 2 years, and I'd phase it in over 25. That means it'd go up 1 month a year every year for the next 25 years, which means if you're on Social Security now, it doesn't affect you. If you're close, it's going to affect you, but by a few months. So if you're 64 today and I put my plan into effect, that means you wouldn't be eligible at 67. You'd be eligible at 67 and 4 months. I don't think that's an enormous sacrifice to ask for another 4 months to make the program solvent. Second thing we need to do is we need to means test Social Security. Let me be specific about what that entails. If you make over $200,000 a year in retirement, that means you got $4 to $5 million in the bank to throw off that kind of money. If you have $4 to $5 million in the bank, first thing I say is God bless you. Good job. You know, you worked your whole life, you raised a family and all the rest, and you were able to save $4 or $5 million. Great work. I'd also say God bless America, because it's the only place in the world you could have done it. So what do we do for our country in that regard? I think if you make $200,000 a year more in retirement, I want to ask you a question. Do you really need a $1,200 a month Social Security check? I don't think so. I don't think it's going to markedly change your lifestyle. But I'll tell you who that $1,200 a month check does change the lifestyle for the hard-working man or woman who paid into the system and worked hard their whole life but don't have that amount of money saved, and that check is the difference between choosing between rent and heat and food. Those are the people got to make sure are protected. And so I understand that people don't like it, talking about it because they say, well, I paid the money in, I want my money back. I want to be the guy who brings you the bad news. The government lied to you and stole from you. There's no other way to put it, everybody. I mean, I am from New Jersey, so I don't put things delicately. But even if I were from someplace else, there's no other way to put it in the trust fund, and they stole the money from the trust fund, and they stole it starting in the 60s. And by the way, the Congress, the folks who budget deal, Cruz and Rubio, who decided they want to be president and couldn't stop the budget deal in Congress, that budget deal stole $150 billion from the Social Security Retirement Fund and put it in the Disability Fund because they don't want Disability Fund because they're not tough enough to make the reforms that need to be made. So same way, and same thing, percent. So you still get some subsidy for the money. in the 8 years before I became governor, and raised spending 56% in those 8 years. So I said to myself, well, raising taxes hasn't worked. So we got to cut spending. I sat down for 6 weeks, 3 days a week with the state treasurer and went through every what it was. They told me how much it was, and then they look at me and say yes or no. No, 800 times. 800 times. We cut 800 programs in that budget. Balance, and it's been in balance ever since. Every dollar of yours they spend, and they don't justify it anymore. Out of the accordion, we got to push in on entitlement. Near nothing. And as long as we have growth at that level, we're not going to get enough money into the government with keeping taxes where they change the regulatory system so that we can grow our economy at a faster rate. If we do, and we'll help to squeeze the accordion. Last piece is this. I'm not going to fix the debt problem in 8 years as president. I'll tell you that honestly. I'm not going to. But we cannot also, and if I told you that, you wouldn't believe me. You go vote for somebody else, and you should. That's what I'll do on the national debt. You're right. We're not going to be able to have enough money to be able to defend ourselves, land or around the world. So those are the things we're going to do them well. Thank you for your question.
Well, Governor, we need to improve and expand mental health care in this country.
In this country. Who engage in these mass shootings have a mental illness issue, and almost every one of these guys has had their guns legally. You remember the officer in Hook, Connecticut. His mother. And he turned the gun on his own mother, killed those young children in that school. It was not going to fix that problem. We need to have much more aggressive mental health treatment. So in New Jersey, this budget that I'll be proposing in a couple of weeks, we're going to be adding over $100 million to help improve mental health and access to mental health treatment in our state. Because what I want, and sure, you can clap for that if you want. But here's the thing. The other thing is we got to give doctors more tools. We have to make it easier for them to involuntarily commit someone if they won't take their medication or if they're speaking out violently. And we know they have an issue. Right now, doctors and family members are afraid to involuntarily commit someone because they're afraid of the legal liability. We got to stop worrying about the legal liability because, oh, I saw you, brother. Don't you worry. I'll get to you. I'll get to you. Don't you worry. So, you know, I want folks to understand that we need to be aggressive about this. Lots of people who have a mental illness don't understand that they need treatment. That's the nature of the illness. And so we need to be more aggressive about how we take care of them. Because we're not only protecting us from them, we're protecting them from themselves. Because all too often they wind up taking their own lives. and that's a sin. So I'd give doctors and families more tools to be able to involuntarily commit folks who are fit those criteria, and we would spend more money, as we're doing at the state level, to make mental health treatment more available to folks who can't afford to get it. And I think we need to lean on our insurance companies a little bit too, to make sure that they're reimbursing for this mental health treatment. So that's the 3 steps I would take, and it's a really important issue, and it is a violence control issue. And let's do things that actually work rather than passing another background check law or another ID law or another ban a certain gun law, because guess what? Every one of these folks had those guns legally. Let's not restrict folks who legally own guns from being able to own them. Let's deal with the folks who are causing violent acts with those guns, criminals and folks who have mental illness. And thank you. All right. This young man here started over there. As I walked over here, he walked over to me. I suspect if I walked over there, he'd walk back over there. If I went into the kitchen and started to make some breakfast, he'd come in and walk in the kitchen with me. He is a man with a question. So we're going to give you the microphone.
Hi, Governor Christie. My name's Ben Mann, and I'm here because my dad couldn't be here today because he's over the road trucking because he's an owner-operator and a veteran. And he asked me to be here on his behalf today to ask you one question. He's torn between you and Donald Trump. And Trump, he sees a man that's self-funded and a man that won't let special interest groups or lobby groups in his back pocket. And when he looks at you, he sees a man that loves his country and has a big heart. You remind him a lot of Ronald Reagan. My dad's question is, how can you reassure my dad if he gives you his vote if you go in the presidency that you won't let lobby groups or special interest groups in your back pocket?
Man, that's a good job. That's a good job. How old are you? You're 10. Okay, this guy's 10. 10, getting ready to turn 11. First off, tell your dad I'm going to hire you when I become president. You did a great job. Let me answer that because it's a really important question. And I find it interesting. You know, it is true that Mr. Trump is self-funding his campaign. That is true. And that Mary Pat and I, as hard as we've worked in our lives, we don't have the money to self-fund our campaign. So we have to rely on others to contribute to us and to help us to run the campaign that we're running. But here's something your dad needs to know. Now, I want to talk to this guy because this guy's going to deliver the message back. And I got a vote on the line here. I want you to tell your dad to remember something. Tell him that I've learned in my years in politics how to be what I call a professional ingrate. Right? That people give me money, and in response, what I tell them is, all you're going to get is what I think in here, not anything else. And if you like what I believe, great. And if you don't, too bad. Okay? So that's one thing you need to tell your dad. Second, remember something. Mr. Trump himself has said that he is a walking, living special interest group and lobbyist. Okay? He's gotten special deals for himself. He's admitted this on the stage. He said he gave money to Hillary Clinton because he wanted to make deals with her. He gave money to all the Democrats, to Nancy Pelosi, because he wanted to make deals with her. It's one of the great ironies of the Trump campaign. He says, I'm not going to be affected by special interests. He is a special interest. He's a walking special interest. And so it's kind of funny that he says those things because he is that. All right? And that's fine. He's had interests, business interests he wanted to put forward. Third thing I want to tell you is that I've worked, and you can tell your dad this because he can relate to it given the work he's doing. I've worked on some rough road. In New Jersey, as a Republican in a Democratic state, every day I got people pulling and tugging at me, telling me I can't do this or I can't do that. I wake up every morning knowing that I'm going to do what's in my heart and in my head that I believe is right for the people of my state. And sometimes it gets Republicans angry, and sometimes it gets Democrats angry, and sometimes it gets all of them angry. But my job is to do the job that I got elected to do and to put politics second and put my job first. Your dad's not here this morning, not because he doesn't want to meet me and that he didn't want to ask me that question himself. He's here not here this morning because he's putting his job first. He's got a job to do, and he's putting his job first because he cares more about supporting your mom and supporting you than he cares about anything else. Yeah, so you tell him that I'm going to be exactly the same way as he is. I'm going to go to work every day, whether it's raining, whether it's snowing, whether it's a good day for me or a bad day. I'm going to go there and they'll remember one thing, that I'm going to work as hard as I can to make sure that I do everything to give him the chance to make his life better, your mom's life better, and your life better. And that's the best I can do every day, and there's no special interest in that pocket. And by the way, tell him not only won't I let the special interest in my back pocket, I won't let them in his front pocket, which is going to be even more important, all right? Thank you, buddy. I should probably just end right there, right? How great is he? What a great kid. And Mom, you should be really proud. I'm sure you are. Really proud. You tell your husband I said be safe on those
industry and the ratings industry. It could happen all over again. That Ormsby in order to prevent that from happening again.
If you've seen that movie, and I have not, I've been a little, haven't had time. Not put in my schedule any movie time, and I'm angry. Like you were by it. And they were like, I saw this movie and you are not going to believe I have no problem with very forms and penalties for the big banks, for the too big to fail banks. Wells Fargo, Bank of America, Citibank, JP Morgan Chase, big money-centered in this country, this risk, just for profit. And knowing that what they were doing, who were getting the loans, let alone of all the rest of us. And there's big difference of opinion in this. I've said we bailed them out once, we're not going to bail them out again. Now, Governor Kasich believes that, and he said this in the debate a few debates ago, that he would bail them out again. And I would not. Okay, my mother used to teach me, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. We gave them the chance, and they now need to be regulated and tied down. But here's the problem with what this president did. He did it to all the banks. So I'm looking over here at the savings bank, the little savings bank here on the corner, right? That savings bank didn't cause that meltdown. They didn't cause the big short. But they're being subjected to the same regulation, the same red tape, the same expenses that Wells Fargo is. What's that do to that savings bank? It crushes them. And it makes it harder for them if, let's say, 3 Tomatoes over here. I love having these windows. It really helps me. Let's say 3 Tomatoes here is doing really well, that their wood-fired pizza is good. Is it good? Have you guys been there? All right. So let's say it's really good, and the guy at 3 Tomatoes or the woman, whoever owns it, says, you know what? I want to open up 3 more 3 Tomatoes in other parts of New Hampshire. But they need to borrow money to do it because they don't have that kind of money. So they go over to Muskoma over there, and they say to him, hey, can we borrow some money for this? And they say, well, see, the problem is I got all this federal regulation, and you have to have all this paperwork, and you need more money in the bank than you actually have for us to be able to give you the loan, because if not, then we'll get fined by the regulators. It is killing small business. So what I would do as president is to take the Dodd-Frank bill and divide it in half. And I would say to the big banks, you got to be subject to all those regulations and all the oversight, the reserves that you need to back up so we don't have to bail you out again. And if you don't do it, you're going to be fined and fined significantly, and your shareholders are going to be hurt. Because I'm not going to let the American taxpayer get hurt again. But I'm going to let that small savings bank in the corner off the hook. There's not enough money in that bank to take down the American economy. Even if they had, if every loan on their portfolio was bad, and we know it's not, but even if it was, It wouldn't take down the American economy. It probably wouldn't take down the New Hampshire economy. But what we need is for that bank to be able to loan money again to folks like Three Tomatoes. We need that because that's the way we're going to grow this economy and grow business. But if all we're doing is having the regulators sit on them every day, they got to hire more accountants and more lawyers to be able to deal with all this stuff, and we can't have that happen. So, I agree with the sense of the movie, but we need to make sure that meat acts that we do helpful. It's who call 7 years watching what this administration did. This administration says that they're for the little guy. This administration has been better for the rich than any administration I've ever seen. You remember when I was in the Bush administration as a prosecuted Bristol Myers Squibb. We prosecuted so many of these corporations that were playing. And I sent 2 different executives to jail for each. You know what? The law's got to apply to everybody. No matter how rich you are, no matter how famous you are, no matter what political party you're in, the law still apply to everybody. It hasn't been that way in this administration. You know why? Because this president took more money. Took more money, as Hillary Clinton's doing, from Goldman Sachs and J.P. Morgan and all those. They bought it from Eric Holder and Barack Obama. Prosecuted people for 7 years as U.S. attorney. I sent a lot of white-collar criminals to jail, both crooked politicians and crooked men. And I will appoint an attorney general that will have one instruction: equal justice under the law. The law, I don't care what your last name is. I don't care who you're.
I come from a family that is very poor. We know what you're going to do to help protect the children.
Well, and the things that it does to their own mental health situation. Families affected for life. So we need to increase the number of intelligence officers, but also increase the tools they have to protect the homeland. The first and most important job is to protect the homeland. In this race who's fought terrorism on September 10th, 2001. Failure of this president, his attorney general, his Homeland Security advisor, and what he's done intelligence apparatus in this country. We would repair that because we have to. Second, we'd put together an alliance around the world. We'd go to the French and say, you know what, you now know you got skin in the game, don't you? With 130 dead folks in Paris, now knows that ISIS is after them as to come and help us fight ISIS. And we need game. America will lead, but we will not be the only people out there fighting because it won't work if we do. So those are the things I would do on ISIS and on the military budget. It's a really good question. Yes, sir, in the back.
Is this
Yeah.
Good morning. My name is David Height. We hear a lot about economic woes around the world, but just a few miles south of Miami, we have bankrupt. And
You know, signs of neglect by the Obama administration. They knew what was going on in Puerto Rico. And for political purposes, they let it continue. They let them continue to borrow money. And so I would be willing to help the people of Puerto Rico going forward. Until they, I'm not going to allow the taxpayers of the rest of the United States to write a blank check to Puerto Rico. So in return, they're going to have to give up some of their, because they've shown themselves in their government, not the people, the government has shown themselves not to be able to be responsible. And so we need to get in there. We don't want that place to go bankrupt, and we don't want those people to suffer. Anything else in life, right? You give somebody something for nothing, they oftentimes don't appreciate it. But if you make a deal with them that in return for help, there's some new discipline on Puerto Rico, then I'd be willing to consider doing that, but only under those circumstances. There has to be some, and it's going to take a while for us to dig them out of the problem they've dug for themselves. This administration has turned its back. Now we're going to own it. Ignore a problem for a long time. You know it only gets worse. Go away. We know that in our own personal lives. It's no different in government. And you ignore a problem, it just keeps getting bigger. And luck, and
So you talked a little bit about the U.S. military, but
easy, Henry Kissinger. And I mean, I'd take him today. 18 months to sit for 2 hours if I was going to be prepared to be president of the United States. He's 92 years old, and he's tough to keep up with. But more importantly than that, all the world and not do what this president is. I don't understand why anybody was mad with all